I feel like every time I'm up here, I always have to say that, like, I just hate following these musical meditations because they're so prayerful and beautiful and really a word that I need to hear. So thank you. So I think I have maybe mentioned this story before, but for those of you that have not heard it, I have always loved school. I've loved school so much that growing up from kindergarten and through senior year of high school, I had perfect attendance, which meant no absences and no tardies. And I went to public school, and so it was a thing. So for 13 years, it was just me, eager to learn in my desk for 13 straight years. And for most of it, I can still tell you the major projects that I had to do throughout my education. In 5th grade, I did a state report on Oregon. I found the most amount of native birds in the San Francisco Bay Area for my 8th grade bird report. I can still recite the Pledge of Allegiance in French. I learned how to tell my blood type, which is O negative, in case any of you need blood, from my AP Bio class. And I can name every state in the United States in order, in alphabetical order, and in a song. I loved school, and I loved learning, and I still do. And large projects were always my favorite. But there was this one project that I hated and I will never forget, and I'll also it took me a while to forgive it. In our high school, and maybe some of yours as well, we had a project called Flower Babies. Maybe some of you know it. It's where you carry a 10-pound sack of flour around pretending like you have a baby. You've got to dress it, you have to name it, you draw a smiley face on it or a sad face or whatever, however the disposition you feel your flower baby had. And you got in trouble if you left it in your locker or in your car or did something that you definitely are not supposed to do with babies. And so the other part of that project, though, and so you have to carry it around for every single class and everything that you did. So whether you're on the soccer team or cross country like I was, you had to find someone to hold this flower baby for you. It was a lot. But the other part of it was that you had to find a job and figure out how to live on your own. And what that entailed was going and grabbing the newspaper. Here's my shout out to local journalism, the Contra Costa Times, and my first employer as a paper girl, the Martinez News Gazette. And you had to go into the paper, and you had to theoretically find a job, a house, and then you used the money from that job to pay your utilities, to buy food, and do childcare, all while going to school. So I found a job that paid minimum wage, which in the late 90s in California was $5.75. I rented a 2-bedroom apartment that was near my high school and the daycare that I had chosen. I budgeted for everything down to the dime. I even had $5 left over to go to the movies once a month and $20 to put into savings. So I felt very on top of it. Now, I did not like this project for a lot of reasons, but one major reason was I didn't think I would learn anything from it. I was forced to assume that having and keeping this baby was the only choice that I had, so I defiantly brought my teacher information on abortion and adoption, but unless I wanted to fail the class, I had to do it. I was angry because it just seemed like a waste for me. But I did the project, I even got an A on it, and the teacher turned to me and said that I would be just fine on my own when the time came. I felt good that at least when that time came, I was completely prepared to navigate the world. I'm not sure that I can roll my eyes hard enough at myself back then right now. Cut to the summer after that project when I turned 16 and I got a car. I got a silver Nissan 1986 4x4 pickup truck that my dad had painted silver with blue flames on the side. It was awesome. I loved that car. We named it the Flame. And however, the Flame came with a stipulation. I had to get a part-time job to pay for the gas. Easy, I thought. I had just successfully raised a flower baby. So I've clearly got this. So I called my next door neighbor who owned our local Ace Hardware, and I got a job. When my first paycheck finally came, though, I could hardly believe it. The check, after taxes and everything were taken out, was barely enough to fill my tank twice a week, which is what I actually needed to get to work. I called my Ema, my grandma, to complain, and I'll never forget what she said. She said, "It's minimum wage, not living wage." I was selfishly mad because I wanted all this extra money, and I was set up to believe that I was going to have all this money. I wanted her to be outraged on my behalf. But as I got home and thought about it, I kind of realized that if I can't even get gas to go to work, how are people actually expected to live off of it? I felt fooled because my privilege let me think that the systems of support that were made to help people succeed were made to help them succeed together. But my ancestors knew better. They had been made that promise, and they had made that mistake before. This has been the hardest part of that project for me to forgive. This is where I wish I would have had that scripture back then, our scripture that we so beautifully heard read this morning. Not that it didn't exist, I just didn't know about it, and why we are so fortunate to have it now. Jeremiah sets us up in the same way that my project did in school, with the promise that it would all work out. But what Jeremiah also shares is that the things that set you up for success need to and can be made new again as you need them. My teacher hadn't really thought to set us up to think that minimum wage was enough to live on, because he thought that when the time came for us to live on our own, that the systems that were in place to support us would change with the times. And that, change with the time, is what God is calling us to do in this text. God is asking us to covenant anew with God so that the needs of our people can be met by the systems that are set to support them. From governmental systems to social structures, anything that is human-made and human-for needs to remember that humans are in covenantal relationship with each other, because we are in a covenantal relationship with God. And thus, we need new systems for a new time. And like God, we need to remember the old systems no more. Which is why these new movements that are happening right now are so important to support and to actually know them deeply. God names the people that were and are in the covenants, specifically naming Judah and Israel and the ancestors. Now, I don't know about you, but most of the headlines that I read are vague descriptions. They use broad terms like government and lawmakers and Christians to describe a more singular narrative in a very complex and nuanced system. That's why I'm really thankful that I'm seeing specific names be called out. On the walkout on March 14th, I saw signs that said Rubio, Cruz, Blunt, McCain, all being called out for breaking covenant with God's beloved children and taking money from the NRA. It's important to name the people that we are in covenant with. That is not loving your neighbor. That is not the covenant that we have signed up for. It's why I support people or women like Lupe Gonzalo of the CIW, who last week renewed a covenant with her sisters in humanity to fight sexual violence against female farm workers. God shows us that it is important to name those that we are in covenant with so that we don't forget our responsibility to them. We have made it far too easy to make the narrative of a piece of humanity a single description and forget that we are connected to it. Now, I've said covenant a lot this morning, and our scripture calls us to pay close attention to it, because it is so much more than a deal or a contract. Contracts, or deals, or a gentleman's agreement are human-made and can be ended if one kind of ruins their part of that deal. But covenants are holy. Covenants give. Covenants endure. Because covenants are of God, for God's people. For as God says, a covenant is a promise so holy that it is written on each one of our hearts. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds perfect and impossible all at once. I am human. I am smart and funny and faithful and courageous and broken and deeply flawed. And God is, well, God. How can this covenant even exist? And not only that, how can this covenant be for me and be for each and every one of you as well? Well, lucky, again, God reminds us that this covenant is new. Because our God is one of creation and renewal. Covenants exist between the human nature of us and the heavenly existence of our Creator. So when it needs a refresher, it can be done. If we break our end of a covenant, it doesn't cancel God's love. God's love bends, it does not break. Because once again, when it needs a refresher, it can be done. So we're in a bending written in our hearts somewhere between human and heaven covenant with God. So now what? That seems hard and impossible again. So now we take note on the commitments in our lives that need to be renewed. We need to hold people accountable. We need to name specifics in the fight against systems of oppression. We need to make new commitments for our time and place in these cosmos. We need to be willing to do it again and again and again. The Second Amendment is outdated and doesn't hold true for us now the way that it did when it was written. Honest living wages for people are necessary for the flourishing of human life and dignity. Women are not property, and her body in its many forms is her own. Vote. Covenant with God's people to build the kingdom. Make your name known for those who represent you. I have a story. My very first day of undergrad, I went to a freshman bonfire mixer. And one of the people of, we had bonfire, that was the middle of the desert. One of the Res Life directors that was putting this entire thing on, his name was Mark Hartley, and he comes up to me, and I'm sitting there, and he's like, hey, freshman, what's your name? And I go, my name's Stephanie Kendell, but that's okay if you don't remember it. There are a lot of Stephanies, and there are a lot of kids here. Stephanie was the third most popular name in 1983, so I grew up with a lot of Stephanies. But Mark turned to me, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, you should expect that I remember your name. You should expect everyone to remember your name because you are important. Don't let people off so easily. Friends, make people remember you because you are worth remembering. You are special. You are in a unique covenant with God. That is special. So those that represent you, make sure they do so adequately and covenant with you and our Creator. Make them get to know your name, who you are, and what you stand for. Because being caught between being human and heavenly means that you can fight like Jesus, but endure like Christ. Amen.